So, I kind of saw on Threads you mentioned that you're a former professional wrestler, if I'm not mistaken.
You're not.
So, tell us a little bit about that and your background and, how you got into doing the Tristian Law show.
All right, so I'll give you the short version because I don't think your listeners, your watchers want to sit around all day and hear me talk about, to give them the long version. But here's the short version. The short version is that I wanted to be a pro wrestler when I was a kid, when I was 5. I remember coming around the corner and living in Brooklyn. I was in my apartment and I came around the corner and I stood at the room of my grandfather and I saw wrestling on the television. And I remember the Undertaker being on the television. I remember how cool that was. And I was like, wow, this is something I want to do. And I've been hooked ever since. So I've had a relationship with pro wrestling where I've fallen in love and out of love with pro wrestling. And eventually I fell out of love with pro wrestling because I was 18 years old. And what do 18, 19-year-old boys want to do? They want to chase girls. So, I chased girls and stuff like that. And then one day, now living in Florida, somebody came to me and said, one of my friends came to me and said, hey, there's wrestling at the sound stages at Universal, here at Universal. I'm like, I don't get off within enough time. And then he tells me, oh no, well, it's after we get off of work. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, he's telling me, oh, well, Jeff Hardy's there and Jeff Jarrett is there. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I said, but I'm not, really interested in wrestling. I don't have the time. He goes, but it's right after work. You can make it. I said, okay, I don't have any money. He goes, it's free. All right, you know what, bro? You got me. You got me. So I remember showing up to the event. I can't remember the name of the event of what it was. It was a TNA pay-per-view. I got to look it up. And the way I can remember what it is, that's the night that Macho Man made his debut. I was standing on the bleachers screaming at the top of my lungs, like, oh my gosh, my first wrestling show I had ever been to in my entire life. And
Wow.
I was hooked like a crackhead. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it right now. And the next night they were taping TNA Impact at Universal. And I said to my friend, I said, hey, you want to go? He goes, oh, I can't make it tonight. Don't worry. I still made it that next night. And after that, I became hooked. So eventually I formulated a plan of, you know what? I wanted to do this as well, too. And what I did was I took some steps and started working out. I got a credit card and I wanted to join a wrestling school in Orlando because I lived in Orlando that Devon Dudley was attached to. A lot of wrestlers came out of that school, such as let me think of a name that you might know. Brian Saxton, Byron
Yeah.
Saxton.
Yeah.
He was in that school.
Okay.
So I wanted to go in that school because I said, hey, I'm a black man and Devon Dudley's a black man. Maybe there's things that he could teach me, as, a black man that's made it in the business. So I sent an email to the company and I didn't get anything back. Okay, great. So now I'm messing around the dirt sheets and then I see Devon Dudley and Bully Bubba Ray Dudley opening up their own wrestling school in Kissimmee, Florida. Kissimmee's where Disney is. That's like 30, 45 minutes from my house. Why not? So I send an email, and then I eventually became a student in the school in June 2007. So after that, I moved to Florida. I mean, I moved back to New York, and I was trained further by Nunzio, Little Guido from ECW, and I sit in front of you now.
Getting to podcasting, like what led you up to starting the Tristian Law show? And how long have you been doing that?
So right now I'm currently in the third season of my podcast, and I recommend for anybody looking to create content, whether it's podcasting or videos on YouTube, take seasons because you get burnt out. When you are an independent podcaster, meaning that you don't have, iHeartRadio or some Sirius XM or somebody behind you, you're doing literally everything by yourself. You're the producer, you're the host, you're the editor, you're the graphic designer, you're the marketer, you're everything. Everything that you could think that goes into it, you're the engineer, you're everything. So you have to take a break. So I just launched season 3 after a 2-year hiatus, and I'm going full swing. How did I get here? I remember, so growing up in the Bronx, I grew up in a rough neighborhood. There's an iconic photo of Tupac floating around with him with the radio. Ever seen that photo?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Behind Tupac, there are two buildings. Those buildings burnt down in the 80s. In the 90s, they built those buildings back and I as one building, and I lived in that building.
Wow.
So I grew up in a tough area. And the programs that I was involved with as a young teen and as a late teen helped steer me along the way. That's why one of the things for me as a father is important for when my son grows up is that I help steer him the right way so that the street doesn't grab him, because the street could have grabbed me. I was in the street. But one of the programs I was in, they took us to college. They took us on a college tour. And I remember going to Hofstra University in Long Island and being enamored by their radio program. They had a radio broadcasting program and they showed us how everything in the radio worked. And I was like, I want to work on radio. This is what I really want to do. So lo and behold, life happens and we're fast forwarding years and ahead now. I'm looking to start podcasting. I don't know what I want to start podcasting about. I go, oh, Donald Trump is president. Maybe I can do a podcast where I talk about, the highs and lows of Donald Trump. I don't really like politics like that to talk to people about it. And, I'm not going to tell people how I feel about certain people in politics, but I just didn't feel that I didn't want to be glamorizing things that should not be glamorized. So I let that one go. Rule number one, if you're looking at a podcast, talk or create content, create about what you love. If you don't love it, don't create about it. Okay. So now I got contacted by a podcast and they were looking for somebody just to come on, just talk about wrestling and talk about, the event that we were running with East Coast Pro Wrestling. And they eventually liked me. They said, wow, you're good at this. We want you to come back. So I started becoming a regular with them, and I started getting my toes wet with them and get my fingers in, and we started trying to grow something together. However, I personally think that there was that we were on the same road as a team, but we were in different lanes. So I think so that we all just went off on our separate ways. I wanted to go to broadcasting school. They wanted $13,000. I don't know where I was going to get $13,000 from, okay, to go pay for broadcasting school. So I said to myself, you know what? One day I'm going to go to broadcasting school. So in the meantime, the pandemic happened and I started podcasting. I said, if I'm going to podcast, I'm going to do it well. So I went out and I bought the equipment. I don't recommend anybody going out to buy equipment. If you don't have the money, don't go buy the equipment. But I went and I bought the equipment. I bought me a board. I bought me a computer. I bought me a good microphone so I sound great. And I just started podcasting. I said, you know what? I want to talk about wrestling. I want to interview my friends. So I started by interviewing my friends. I did a season one. When I listen to season one now, I cringe. I cringe listening to season one. Because as you keep podcasting or creating, you get better, you grow. All right. So now we're in the pandemic and I have a friend who has a YouTube channel, Dave Knows Wrestling. He says to me, hey, you want to come to my broadcasting school? I said, yeah. So we worked out a deal, and I was able to go to his broadcasting school for something that was really affordable, and he helped polish my skills. So when you go to YouTube, season 2 is video and audio. Looking at season 2 now, I cringe. I cringe. Look now, season 3, I took a 2-year break between podcasting. I didn't realize until a couple days ago that season 2 was only 6 episodes long. This season, I'm already a month into the season. I'm already 14 episodes in. So the burnout is eventually going to come, and I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go away and come back and learn a new trick. Because one of the things I always remember Jim Ross saying, in interviews and stuff like that, it's okay for wrestlers to leave the company and learn a new trick and come back. So the tricks that I have now is that I'm only live. My podcast is only live. I don't want to do anything that is pre-recorded. There's too much anxiety in it for me. And the second I record it, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. That's terrible. And I end up editing the whole entire thing. I eventually landed a radio job where I worked on a radio. I worked on a country music radio station. Do I like country music? I didn't at the time, but the opportunity came along and they said, "Hey, you want to be on the radio?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "You like country music?" I love country music. I'm so glad they didn't ask me who I liked, because I would have lied. I would have exposed myself right then and there. So I utilized my skills that I have from working on the radio to live radio to working on this podcast. I hate live. I hate doing live. And everybody says, "Why do you hate live?" I said, "Because it's live." They go, "Why do you love live?" I said, "Because it's live." Because when it's live, anything can happen, anything can go wrong. But there's also an anxiety in there that's built onto that. And it's like, oh my God, I have a timer that counts down on my podcast when we go live on YouTube. And I'm like, oh my God, you got 3 minutes and 20 seconds. You got 2 minutes. You got a minute. You got 10 seconds. I'm like, okay, you have to hit the transition because they're waiting to see you. Deep breath, transition. Welcome to the Tristian Law Show. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. I'm Tristian Law. And then it just like, in that first breath, I let all the anxiety out. And that's what I'm here doing now. Right now, what I'm doing is on my podcast, The Tristian Law Show, which is live on YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays at noon. What I'm doing is I'm exploring my love for pro wrestling. As a young pro wrestler, learning from the Dudley Boys, learning from Nunzio, learning from everybody else, you always taught to not be a mark, right? To not be a super fan. And the way I look at it now that I'm a lot older, the biggest marks are the one in the rings. Because we sat there and got so enamored by what happened on the television that we decided to go pay money and learn how to do it. We are the biggest marks, okay? So what I do is I express my love for pro wrestling and my fandom on my YouTube channel. What I'm working on as well too is doing live interviews. So I'm going to go back to the interview aspect like I did before, but it's going to be 100% live. And yeah, that's the Tristian Law Show. That's where I am. That's how I am today.